I've decided to do this video as a form of encouragement for moms out there, or any parent at all, both moms and dads who are or who may have recently given birth to a premature child, or for anyone that's currently pregnant. Not trying to, use it as a damper, because I want you to enjoy your experience, but at the same time, just to kind of enlighten you on what you could possibly go through. I don't believe any parent out there, when you find out that you're pregnant, in your mind you're thinking, okay, you're gonna have a healthy baby. No one is actually thinking about the possibility of certain complications, or even certain birth defect that your child may be born with. I wasn't thinking about that when I found out about it. For me, when we found out that we were pregnant, we were extremely excited. This was our first pregnancy, would be our first child. When you think about being a parent, it's something that you've thought about in your earlier years, but you never actually can describe that feeling until you're actually in that moment. And so for me, it was so surreal. We were excited. I mean, we were doing so much, looking up so much information online, looking up names and stuff like that. It was just a wonderful moment. As time went on, it was just a blessing, just also to actually go to the doctor, and they confirmed, yeah, you're actually expecting, and then you can hear the heartbeat. It was just beautiful. It's a beautiful experience. I would say when it hit about 3 months, I started experiencing a little bit of complications. I started spotting, and that spotting eventually, as the days went on, turned into full-blown bleeding. Now, mind you, each time that I see the spotting, I will go to the emergency room. Just praying, I'm like, Lord, please don't let, the baby be gone. Let the baby still be here, And every time I go to the emergency room, in spite of all that spotting or bleeding, the heartbeat was still there, amidst all of it. And so we were extremely grateful for that. But at the same time, I know because of my age, I was considered a high risk as well. And so the doctors, because of the whole situation, they kept a really close eye on me. So the doctors wanted to keep a very close eye on me. And so instead of coming in, say, every other month for ultrasound, they had me coming in every 2 weeks, just to make sure that the baby was okay. Another thing was that there was a blood test. I can't remember the exact name of it, that you take when you're high risk, just to make sure that your child is not born with certain birth defects like Down syndrome and so forth. During the time when I took mine, I believe I wasn't quite 4 months as yet, and so I was able to find out from the exact same test. I was able to find out the sex of the baby before even doing any form of ultrasound, and then a test for other like chromosomal type of issues and so forth. And so the test also showed that there was a possibility that my son would be born with spina bifida. Anyway, so because of those things, the doctors, and again, because of my age at the time, the doctors wanted to keep a close eye on me. And so I would go in every 2 to 3 weeks for ultrasound. And each time that I go in, they will measure the size of the baby. They will check his spine to make sure that there are no gaps in between, and to just make sure that everything is okay. There was one time that I went in. Well, each time that I go in, let me just backtrack a little. They did tell me that the baby is behind when it comes to growth. For his age, like his size, say for example, like at 5 months, he was only weighing like a few ounces. When he got to 6 months, when I was actually 6 months pregnant, he was only coming in at 1 pound. Okay, and so he was growing, but at an extremely slower rate. When I got to 7 months, he was only like 1 pound, a few ounces. I don't remember the exact measurement, but he was like 1 pound, a few ounces. And typically, like a 7 month, a mom that's 7 months pregnant, the baby would typically weigh at least 3 pounds, and so that was like a huge red flag as well for the doctors. And so there was one time that I went in to do an ultrasound, and I noticed after the exam, the ultrasound tech and the doctor was actually to the side, kind of talking, and they're talking, but they're, I guess, in a way so that I couldn't hear what they were saying, or they didn't want me to hear what they were saying. I guess they didn't want to alarm me. And so I didn't think much of it until the doctor told me that he said, "Oh, I'll be right back. I'm gonna talk to my colleagues. I'll be back." And then he was gone for about 10 minutes. And then when he actually came back in the room, he told me that we're actually going to be keeping you in the hospital. We're going to admit you today, right now. We can't let you go home. And so I was like, okay, what's going on? And so they told me that they're concerned again with the weight of the baby. He's not growing, and they were concerned that if I were to go home, that there's a great possibility that the baby would not survive. And so they didn't want to take that risk. They wanted to be proactive and just being able to keep a closer eye on him to make sure that his heart rate is not decreasing and that everything is okay. And so they told me that they're going to admit me that day. I was completely terrified. I was terrified. I was just praying. I was like, Lord, just please let everything be okay. Let my baby be okay. Just trying to remain positive at that point in time. Anyway, so I was on bed rest, so they put me on bed rest at the hospital where they were monitoring his heart rate. So I was basically hooked up to the monitors, 6 hour. I was like on for 6 hours, and then they'll give me like a 2 hour break. So I have to lay in the bed, watch TV, do whatever, puzzles, read book for 6 hours, and then if I need to go to like step away to go to the restroom, then I'll call the nurse and they'll unhook me. But then I'll have to come back and keep going. And so after being there for about a week, even though I was completely grateful for all that they're doing, but I kid you not, I was going insane. Just being in that room, confined to that room, not being able to move around like I want to, or, eat what I want to. Because you guys know how the hospital food is, but I'm not even going to complain. I'm completely grateful. And so there were times when I was there that his heart rate would go down, and the nurses would rush in just to make sure that everything is okay with the monitors. And they were like, okay, the baby heart just went down a few minutes ago. We just want to, make sure that everything is okay. And I'm like, okay, I appreciate that. And so while I was there though, they were doing the ultrasound still this time they were doing it every other day. And so there was one day that I went in, I remember it clearly, it was like a Monday. At this time I was in the hospital for about a week and a half. And so it was a Monday. It was early in the morning. I remember that because I didn't eat anything that morning. And so while I was in the room again, I noticed the doctor. This was a different doctor now. There was a doctor and the ultrasound tech. After they did the exam, they were to the side talking. And again, she came to me. She's like, "Oh, I'll be right back. I'm just gonna talk to my colleagues." And so I'm like, okay. I started worrying again. Anyway, she came back and she was like, "Did you eat anything today?" And I said, "No." She was like, "Okay, well, don't eat anything, okay? Make sure we're going to send you back to your room, but don't eat anything because we might have to take the baby today." And I'm like, okay, what's going on? Did you see something abnormal? And she told me that my amniotic fluid was getting low. And so they weren't even going to try to, their intent was to try to keep me until at least I was 32 weeks. By this time, I was 7 months. And so, 28 weeks. And so she was like, okay, we're not even going to try because we're realizing that the amniotic fluid is getting low. And so we just did not want to take that risk of him, of losing him. Anyway, went back to my room, scared as heck because, when you think about, I mean, yeah, when you're pregnant, you're excited. But when you think about actually giving birth or going through the process of having surgery, because this is a major surgery, I was terrified. I was completely terrified. And so I called my family, called everyone, and they came, they were praying for me and so forth. I really appreciated it. Anyway, so the moment came, that afternoon, got hooked up by the anesthesiologist and everyone in the surgery room. All that bright lights, it was just scary. Anyway, so they just spoke to me, let me know what they're doing, what they will be doing, and him for a few seconds, but then they'll have to rush him over to the NICU because they were pretty positive that he will be needing immediate medical attention. Anyway, so the time while we're there, got me hooked up with the epidural and everything. They were just basically touching my skin. Oh, can you, like my stomach, can you feel this? And I'm like, okay, yeah. Can you feel this? I'm like, yeah. And so I felt when they did the first cut, and I'm like, okay, I felt that. I could feel that. And they were like, okay, we're going to have to put you out. So they basically put me to sleep through the entire process. When I woke up in the emergency room, I was just completely out of it. I asked them how the baby was, and they were saying he was okay, but he's in the NICU. Anyway, I just didn't have the strength to actually get up out of my bed to go to the NICU and see how he was doing. Luckily, his dad was there, so he would, he took pictures. He would bring it to me and say, "Oh, this is what he looked like." The nurses would bring pictures, show me pictures on their phones of him, and the next, I didn't get to see him until like the next day. I was basically urged just to try to get up out the bed and try to move around a little bit. And so I did that, and when I went down to the NICU and saw him for the very first time, I started bawling. Because he was so, when I say tiny, he was extremely tiny. He literally fit in the palm of my hands. He was tiny and skinny. And I was like, wow. So I felt bad just seeing him like that. But at the same time, I was like, wow, I finally get to see that little person that was moving around and kicking and so forth. And so when I saw him, he was hooked up to oxygen, different heart monitors, and so forth. IV and all that in the incubator. It was just crazy. And he had on these small, when I say extremely small diapers, they were so small that I didn't even know that they had diapers that size. Okay, these were small. When I say extremely small, it is extremely small. I don't know how it might look in the camera, but these diapers are something that you could probably fit in a Barbie doll. That's how tiny these diapers are, that he was wearing. And they had one of these small little hats on his head. I bought a few, like, he didn't get a chance to wear these, but these were like little preemie stuff. So just to give you an idea how tiny he was. And even these like onesies were super big for him. These are for preemies, but these were extremely, extremely big for him. Just to give you an idea to how tiny he was. He was 1 pound 9 ounces. And again, I mean, it was just a very daunting experience for us because we really tried to remain positive, but it was just hard. It was hard because, again, as I say, when you're pregnant, you don't imagine these things happening. You plan and you plan for the best, but you never know when life will throw you a curveball. You just have to brace yourself for it and just try as much as possible to remain positive. Anyway, so while he was in the NICU, I guess because of his prematurity, his stomach could not process anything. They tried feeding him like, because he had a tube feed hooked up through his mouth, and then they have a machine that would try to pump a little bit, little small ounces, some really really small dosage of the milk. But each time they would do that, he would spit it up. But when he did, it would be like green mucus coming out from him. And so the doctors informed me that apparently he had like a stomach infection or something going on. He's just wasn't able to process anything at that particular point in time. And so they had to stop actually feeding him and actually use fat. They were giving him fat through the IV. So they had to give him fat to keep him going. And so they backed off for about a day, and then they tried him again, and then he was doing the same thing again. He was spitting up the same green mucus, and so they were unable for a few days to feed him. They had to just keep giving him the fat through the IV and just hope for the best. I would say probably about a week is when he actually started. His stomach was actually finally able to process the milk. So at that time they were still giving him the fat. So they were giving both the fat and the milk. That was good news because, mind you, he was already 1 pound 9 ounces, and then he lost a couple of ounces because, he wasn't able to digest the milk properly. So imagine being that small, but at the same time, keep losing weight. We were extremely worried because we didn't know what was going to happen to him. Would he be able to survive? I mean, just seeing him, he was just so frail. It was just thinking about it, I would not wish that moment or that experience on anyone. Anyway, as time went on, the doctor let us know that he would not be able to go home until he at least gets to 4 pounds, and that would take a while. One of the things that we didn't get a chance to really hold him. We just could only look at him through the incubator. But as time went on, they did allow us to hold him. They call it skin to skin, and I guess with them doing that, they say that with the baby being close to the parent's skin, who and hearing the parent's heartbeat and smelling their parent's scent actually helps them to grow fast or to develop a little bit faster from the stage that they are. And so we were able to do that. His dad and I will alternate. So if I get to hold him today, then he'll hold him the next day on our chest for like about 10 minutes. As he started to gain weight, they started to increase the time a little bit. So it went from like 10 minutes to like 15 minutes. So those moments we look forward to those things every day. And so we were still praying a lot. Our pastor and his wife came by. They prayed over him a lot. I'm telling you, I mean, if you're not a spiritual person going through something like this, will actually cause you to become spiritual. I kid you not. And so just those little things are what we really appreciate. Just the small prayers. I mean, just to know that, someone is thinking about you, thinking about your child, or, praying for your child. We really appreciated that. And so that helped a lot. It helped to just take our focus from that situation and just to try to remain positive. And so we did that as time went on, and then they would weigh him every night, and every night when they weighed him, he'll put on like an extra ounce or 2 ounces, and we were just extremely excited. And then once he got to the point where he was able to maintain his own body weight, then they were able to take him they took him out of the incubator and put him just like in a regular crib. He was still hooked up to the monitors. There were times when he would actually once he had enough strength, he would start pulling out his own tube feed out of his mouth, pulling out his oxygen. And so one night, the nurse, she said, he kept pulling in the tube, the oxygen out of his nose. And she was like, you know what, let me just, she just decided to just leave it out for a minute just to watch him, to see how he would actually do on his own without the help from the oxygen. And she was like, he did great the entire night. So she, ever since then, they took him off the oxygen, so he was now breathing on his own. He was still on the tube feed for a little bit. They had to keep testing him on the bottle just to make sure that he was was able to actually suck like a pacifier, to suck a a bottle on his own. And so we did that. We tried him. He drank the first time like exactly 1 ounce. And so once the doctor saw that he was able to do that on his own, then they finally took the tube feed out. And so whenever it's time for him to be fed, then I would use the bottle to feed him. We were just extremely, just to see those little small progress, we were extremely excited about. I mean, it takes time, it takes patience, but when you realize where you're coming from and just seeing him making those gradual improvements, you were extremely excited, elated. And so time went on, and then he stayed in the hospital for about 2 months before he was able to go home. And we were excited, but at the same time we were scared the day when he was going home, because when you're in the hospital, you have the nurses there, the doctors are there, you have the monitors there. If his heart rate goes down, it'll show up on the monitor, and you have the nurses and the doctors rushing in just to make sure he's okay. Now when you're at home with him, you're thinking in your mind, okay, what are we going to expect? It was scary. But at the same time, so we were asking the doctors and the nurses a lot of questions, like, should we try to get a monitor for ourselves when we get home? They were like, no, just go home. Just make sure you keep a close eye on him, because if you get the monitor, you're going to be watching the monitor more than you're watching him. So just keep a close eye. Everything is going to be okay. Came home. Well, let me backtrack a little bit. So while we were there, before he actually left the hospital, the doctors asked us if we wanted to get him circumcised. So we were like, yeah, we're open to it. And when the day came for him to be circumcised, they were like, okay, I'm sorry, but we are not going to be able to do it because he has a birth defect that's called hypospadia and chordee. Now that I'll discuss in another video. That time they told us that he will have to have surgery when he got to about 6 months. And so that kind of put a damper on our spirit, because we're like, okay, again, what's next? It's like we just made it through this huge hurdle, and then now find out that he had a birth defect, and that he would have to have surgery. Another thing that they tested before he left the hospital was his hearing, because usually with most premature babies, a lot of them have issues with their hearing and also their vision. And so one of his ear passed, the other one didn't. They tested his eyes, but they weren't able to tell at that particular point if he would have issues with his vision. But I'll discuss that in the next video. Again, I just want to use this as a form of encouragement to parents out there. If you have a premature child, if you have a child that's disabled, was born with any form of disability, I just want to encourage you that it is not the end, and I promise you that it will get better as time goes on. I know when you're in that moment, it is hard to see past that moment, but I guarantee you there is light at the end of the tunnel. If you're a spiritual person, just keep praying, and as much as possible, make sure that you spend time with your child in the hospital. Don't just leave everything up to the doctors and the nurses to do. I know it's kind of difficult if you have a family, you have other kids at home, then you probably won't be able to spend as much time there as you want to. But even if you can't go, ask your mom, ask a family member, someone to just go and just sit and just to watch and just to make sure everything is okay. I know for us, for me at least, I was just extremely leery of everyone. I know the nurses and the doctors were there to help, but at the same time, I want to make sure that he's okay. You know, it was just that motherly instinct in me. His dad was like, "Oh, you need to relax a little bit. You're worried." I mean, I just couldn't help it. You know, and I don't regret being that way because, you know, that love and that protection that you have for your child. Yes, even though the nurses they're trained in those areas, but nothing can compare to a parent's love and compassion towards your child. So as much as possible, you make sure that you are there 24/7 with your baby to make sure that everything is okay. Make sure that nothing goes wrong. Okay. You just be surprised to just know sometimes the nurses and the doctors they can only do so much, and when you are short staffed and you have so many other babies there, they cannot give to your child the amount of attention that your child needs. So you have to be there to make sure that you are doing your part as the parent. But again, just know that it's gonna get better. Know that it is not the end. Know that there is indeed light at the end of the tunnel. So I'll thank you guys for watching. Please remember to rate and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.